My name is Jessica Martinez. I am 37 years old, and for 5 years, I worked at the most prestigious law firm in the city, Sterling and Associates. I wasn't a lawyer. I was the office manager, the person who kept everything running smoothly, while the fancy lawyers took all the credit. But I loved my job. I organized files, managed schedules, ordered supplies, and made sure the office ran like a well-oiled machine. I arrived early every morning and stayed late every night. I worked through holidays and weekends. I gave that firm everything I had. My boss, Richard Sterling, was the senior partner. He was 55 years old, always wore expensive suits, and treated me like I was invisible most of the time. But I didn't mind. I was good at my job, and I thought that was enough. I was wrong. Everything changed when Richard's niece, Vanessa Sterling, graduated from law school. She was 26, blonde, beautiful, and absolutely useless at actual work. "Jessica, this is Vanessa," Richard said on her first day. "She'll be joining us as a junior associate. I want you to show her the ropes, help her get settled." "Of course," I said, smiling at Vanessa. "Welcome to the team." Vanessa barely looked at me. She was too busy checking her reflection in her phone screen. Over the next few weeks, I tried to help Vanessa learn how the office worked. But she didn't want to learn. She wanted everything done for her. "Jessica, file these documents for me," she would say, dumping papers on my desk. "Jessica, I need coffee. The fancy kind from the shop downstairs. Jessica, reschedule my meetings. I have a nail appointment." I did it all without complaining. That was my job, right? To help everyone? But Vanessa wasn't grateful. She acted like I was her personal servant. Vanessa started making mistakes, big ones. She would miss court dates, file papers incorrectly, and lose important documents. But somehow, these mistakes always became my fault. "Jessica should have reminded me about that deadline," Vanessa would tell Richard. "Jessica must have misfiled those documents. Jessica didn't put the meeting on my calendar correctly." I tried to defend myself, but Richard always believed his niece over me. Family loyalty, I guess. Then came the big mistake that would change everything. Vanessa was working on a huge case, a corporate merger worth $50 million. She was supposed to file specific paperwork with the court by 5 p.m. on Friday. I reminded her 3 times that week. I know, she said, waving me away. "Stop nagging me, Jessica." Friday afternoon came. At 4:30 p.m., I checked with Vanessa. "Did you file the merger documents?" "Oh my God, I forgot," Vanessa said, looking panicked. "What do I do?" "The courthouse closes in 30 minutes, I said. "If we rush, we might make it." I grabbed the documents and ran to the courthouse myself. I literally ran 6 blocks in my heels. I made it with 5 minutes to spare and filed the papers. The merger was saved. The client was happy. The firm made millions. Did anyone thank me? No. The next Monday, Richard called me into his office. His face was red with anger. "Jessica, we have a serious problem," he said. "What's wrong?" "The merger documents you filed last Friday were incomplete. Critical pages were missing. Our client is furious, and we could lose the entire deal." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I filed everything Vanessa gave me." "Vanessa says she gave you the complete file. She says you must have lost some pages." "That's not true. I filed exactly what she gave me. If pages were missing, that's her fault, not mine." Richard's eyes went cold. "Are you calling my niece a liar?" "I'm saying there's been a mistake and it wasn't mine." "I've been noticing a pattern with you lately, Jessica," Richard said slowly. "Mistakes, missed deadlines, attitude problems. Maybe you're not right for this job anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After 5 years of perfect service, he was questioning my competence because of his incompetent niece. "Richard, please, let's review the security footage. The cameras will show exactly what documents I had when I left." Richard shook his head. "The security system was being updated that day. There's no footage." "How convenient." "I'm sorry, Jessica," Richard said, though he didn't look sorry at all. "I'm going to have to let you go. Effective immediately." "You're firing me." "After 5 years? I'm giving you 2 weeks severance. That's more than generous." 2 weeks? That's nothing. I've given you 5 years of my life." "And we're grateful," Richard said dismissively. "But this isn't working out. Please pack your desk and leave by the end of the day." I sat there in shock. This couldn't be happening. I had done nothing wrong. What about my benefits? My retirement contributions? My vacation days? You'll receive information about that in the mail, Richard said, already turning back to his computer. Goodbye, Jessica. I walked out of his office in a daze. Vanessa was standing near my desk, and when our eyes met, she smiled. A small, cruel smile that told me everything. She had done this on purpose. She had set me up to take the fall for her mistake, and Richard had believed her because she was family. I packed my desk in silence while the other employees avoided looking at me. After 5 years of friendship and teamwork, no one said goodbye. No one defended me. I carried my box of belongings out of the building and stood on the sidewalk, unemployed and humiliated. But as I stood there, something inside me changed. The shock and hurt transformed into something else. Anger. Cold, focused, determined anger. They had wronged me. They had used me and thrown me away like garbage. And I was going to make them pay. I went home and cried for exactly 1 hour. Then I dried my tears, made coffee, and started planning. I had been the office manager for 5 years. I knew everything about Sterling and Associates. I knew their clients, their cases, their secrets. I knew where all the bodies were buried, so to speak. And I had something Richard didn't know about. I had copies of everything. You see, part of my job had been to back up all the firm's files to the cloud. I had access to every email, every document, every piece of correspondence for the past 5 years. And I had saved my own copies before they fired me. I started going through the files, looking for anything useful. And, I found so much more than I expected. I found evidence that Richard had been overcharging clients for years, padding bills with fake hours and expenses. I found emails showing that he had bribed a judge to win a case. I found proof that the firm had been hiding assets to avoid paying taxes. Richard Sterling wasn't just unethical, he was a criminal, and I had all the proof I needed to destroy him. But then I found something even more interesting, something that would make my revenge even sweeter. Sterling and Associates rented their fancy office space in a downtown high-rise. The building was beautiful, all glass and marble and modern design. The rent was astronomical, which is why Richard complained about it constantly. As I dug through financial records, I discovered something shocking. The building wasn't owned by some big corporation like I had assumed. It was owned by a private real estate trust. And when I traced that trust through several shell companies, I found the ultimate owner. The building was owned by a woman named Margaret Chen, an elderly widow who had inherited it from her late husband. And here's the interesting part. Margaret Chen was currently in a nursing home with dementia. Her finances were being managed by her grandson, David Chen. I knew David. He had been a client of the firm briefly, years ago. I had his contact information in my files. An idea began forming in my mind. A perfect, beautiful idea. I called David Chen and asked if we could meet for coffee. He remembered me and agreed. David was 30 years old, worked in tech, and seemed like a nice guy. We met at a cafe downtown. "Thanks for meeting me," I said. "I wanted to talk to you about your grandmother's building." "The one downtown? The office building?" "Yes. I used to work for one of your tenants, Sterling and Associates. They just fired me unfairly and, well, I'm angry. But I also think I can help you." David looked interested. "Help me how? Do you know how much rent Sterling and Associates pays your grandmother?" I think it's like $20,000 a month." I smiled. "Try $45,000 a month, and they're always 3 months behind on payments. The firm is drowning in debt, but they maintain this expensive office to look successful." David's eyes widened. "They owe us $135,000? At least. And I have documentation proving it. They've been playing games with your grandmother's property management company, claiming the bills were sent to the wrong address, disputing charges, always finding excuses not to pay." David looked furious. "Why didn't the property management company tell me this?" "Because the property management company Sterling hired is run by Richard Sterling's brother-in-law. They're all in on it together, keeping your grandmother's income low so they can pocket the difference. That's fraud." "Yes, it is, and I can prove it. I have 5 years of emails and financial records." David stared at me. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" I took a deep breath. "I want you to evict Sterling and Associates. Immediately. And I want to watch them scramble, just for revenge. Not just revenge, I said. Justice. They fired me to cover up their own incompetence and corruption. They owe your grandmother over $100,000. They've been committing fraud. They deserve to lose everything. David thought about it for a long moment. Then he smiled. Okay, let's do it. But I want copies of all that evidence. Deal. We shook hands, and my revenge began to take shape. David hired a real lawyer, not from Sterling and Associates, obviously, and filed an eviction notice. The firm had 30 days to pay all back rent plus penalties, or they had to vacate the premises. The notice was delivered on a Monday morning. I heard through a friend who still worked there that Richard's face turned purple when he read it. He immediately called the property management company, but they suddenly weren't returning his calls. His brother-in-law had disappeared, knowing the fraud was about to be exposed. Richard tried to negotiate, but David stood firm. Pay what you owe, or get out. The firm didn't have the money. They were already drowning in debt. Paying $135,000 plus penalties would bankrupt them. Richard had 30 days to figure something out. Meanwhile, I moved on to phase 2 of my plan. Using an anonymous email account, I sent all the evidence of Richard's crimes to the State Bar Association. Overcharging clients, bribing judges, tax fraud, everything. I also sent copies to several of Sterling and Associates' biggest clients, with a simple message. Did you know your lawyer has been stealing from you? Then I sat back and watched the chaos unfold. The Bar Association launched an immediate investigation. Clients started pulling their cases and demanding audits of their bills. 2 clients filed lawsuits against the firm for fraud. Sterling and Associates was falling apart, and Richard had no idea who was behind it. He suspected competitors. He suspected angry former clients. He even suspected other lawyers in his own firm. He never suspected me. After all, I was just the office manager. What could I possibly do? While Richard was dealing with the legal chaos, Vanessa was still making mistakes. Without me there to clean up after her, her incompetence was finally becoming obvious. She missed another court deadline, costing a client a major settlement. She filed documents in the wrong court. She showed up to meetings unprepared. Clients started complaining. Other lawyers in the firm started complaining. Even Richard couldn't ignore it anymore. But Vanessa was family, so Richard couldn't fire her. Instead, he moved her to research, which basically meant she sat in her office doing nothing while collecting a paycheck. She posted on social media constantly, taking selfies at her desk, complaining about how boring work was, showing off her expensive lunches and shopping trips. I saved every post. They would be useful later. 30 days came and went. Sterling and Associates couldn't pay the back rent. They tried to get a loan, but no bank would lend money to a firm under investigation for fraud. On day 31, David Chen arrived with a sheriff and a locksmith. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," David said, not sounding sorry at all. "But your lease is terminated. You have 2 hours to remove your personal belongings. Everything else stays as payment toward your debt." Richard looked like he might have a heart attack. "You can't do this. We have clients. We have cases." "You should have paid your rent," David said calmly. I watched from across the street as lawyers and staff members carried boxes out of the building. 5 years of work packed up in boxes in 2 hours. Richard stood on the sidewalk, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face red, looking lost and defeated. Vanessa was crying, complaining that she had left her designer purse inside and demanding to go back for it. The sheriff told her no. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Without their fancy downtown office, Sterling and Associates tried to continue operating from a cheap rental space in the suburbs. But things kept getting worse. The Bar Association suspended Richard's law license pending their investigation. Several of the firm's lawyers quit and joined other firms, taking their clients with them. The lawsuits from angry clients continued piling up. Within 3 months, Sterling and Associates went bankrupt. The firm that had existed for 30 years, that had once been prestigious and successful, was gone. Richard lost everything: his career, his reputation, his money. He had to sell his house and his expensive car to pay legal fees. Vanessa couldn't find another law job anywhere. Her incompetence was now well documented, and her uncle's scandal had tainted her by association. Last I heard, she was working as a hostess at a restaurant and still living with her parents. Meanwhile, I had moved on to bigger and better things. Remember David Chen? We had become friends during our revenge plot. His tech company was growing rapidly, and he needed someone to manage operations. You kept an entire law firm running for 5 years, he said. Imagine what you could do with a company that actually appreciates you. He offered me a job as his director of operations, with a salary that was double what Sterling had paid me, plus benefits, stock options, and actual respect. I accepted immediately. David's company was amazing. The people were young and energetic. The work was interesting and challenging. Everyone treated each other with respect. And unlike Sterling and Associates, they actually valued the people who kept things running smoothly. I thrived there. Within a year, I was promoted to Vice President of Operations. I helped the company grow from 50 employees to 200. I was making more money than I had ever dreamed of. But the best part? The sweet, sweet revenge that was still unfolding. David and I decided to renovate his grandmother's building, the one Sterling and Associates had been evicted from. We wanted to turn it into a modern co-working space for startups and small businesses. We hired architects and designers. We spent millions updating the space with new technology, comfortable furniture, and modern amenities. And we hired the best office manager in the city to run it, me. I managed the building operations while also working as VP at David's tech company. It was a lot of work, but I loved every minute. We called it the Chen Building, in honor of David's grandmother. When it opened, it was the most sought-after office space in the city. And you know who came begging for space there? Richard Sterling. A year after Sterling and Associates went bankrupt, Richard tried to restart his career. His law license was eventually reinstated after he paid fines and took ethics courses, though his reputation was destroyed. He opened a small solo practice working out of a cheap office in a strip mall. But he hated it. He missed the prestige, the fancy office, the respect. When he heard about the Chen Building and its affordable rates for small businesses, he applied for office space. His application landed on my desk. I stared at it for a long time, Richard Sterling's signature at the bottom, requesting a small office suite. I could reject it. I could deny him the space and watch him suffer in his strip mall office forever. But that felt too easy, too quick. I had a better idea. I approved Richard's application, but requested an in-person interview, which was standard procedure for all new tenants. Richard showed up at the scheduled time, looking older and more tired than I remembered. He was wearing a suit that had seen better days. His expensive watch was gone, probably sold to pay bills. He walked into my office, and I watched his face change as he recognized me. "Jessica," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Hello, Richard," I said calmly. "Please, have a seat." He sat down slowly, looking like he might be sick. I didn't know you worked here," he stammered. "I don't just work here," I said with a smile. "I manage this building. I decide who gets office space and who doesn't." Richard's face went pale. He knew he was at my mercy. "I'm also Vice President of Operations at Chen Technologies," I continued. "David Chen and I are good friends. In fact, this whole building belongs to his grandmother. You remember David Chen, don't you, your former client?" Richard said nothing. He just stared at his hands. "So here's the situation," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You want office space in this building, and I have the power to give it to you or deny you. What do you think I should do?" "Jessica, please," Richard said quietly. "I know I was wrong. I know I treated you terribly. I'm sorry, I've lost everything. I'm trying to rebuild my life. Please don't make this harder." "You're sorry?" I asked. "Are you sorry you fired me unfairly? Sorry you believed your incompetent niece over me? Sorry you let me take the blame for her mistakes?" "Yes," Richard said. "I'm sorry for all of it. You were a good employee, and I treated you badly. And if I give you office space here, how do I know you'll pay your rent? You owe David's grandmother over $200,000 in back rent and penalties from your old firm." Richard flinched. "I'm paying that back in monthly installments. It'll take years, but I'm paying it." I pretended to think about it. "Okay, Richard, I'll give you office space. but on my terms. Anything, he said desperately. First, I said, you'll pay your rent on time, every month, no exceptions. One late payment, and you're evicted immediately. Agreed. Second, you'll write a letter of recommendation for me, admitting that I was an excellent employee and that my termination was unjust. Richard hesitated but nodded. Okay. Third, you'll write a check for $25,000 to me personally as compensation for the emotional distress you caused and the wages I lost while unemployed. I don't have $25,000, Richard protested. Then you can set up a payment plan, I said coldly. But you'll pay every penny. Consider it the cost of redemption. Richard looked defeated but nodded again. Fine. And finally, I said, leaning forward, you'll tell Vanessa exactly what you did to me and why it was wrong. You'll admit to her that you chose her over the truth, and that decision destroyed your firm. And you'll tell her that she needs to take responsibility for her own incompetence. She's my niece. She's a grown woman who needs to learn consequences, I interrupted. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Richard sat in silence for a long moment. Then he nodded. I accept. Richard moved into a small office in the Chen building. It was about 1/10 the size of his old office at Sterling and Associates, but it was professional and clean. He paid his rent on time every month, he made his monthly payments to me without complaint, and he wrote me a glowing letter of recommendation admitting his mistakes. I heard from mutual contacts that he actually did confront Vanessa about her behavior. They had a huge fight, and she didn't speak to him for months. But eventually, she apologized to him and started taking her career more seriously. She went back to school to improve her legal skills and eventually found a job at a small firm willing to give her another chance. Richard slowly rebuilt his practice. He focused on helping people who couldn't afford fancy lawyers the kind of work that was meaningful but not particularly profitable. He was never going to be prestigious or wealthy again, but he was earning an honest living and, I think, learning to be a better person. Every time he saw me in the building, he nodded respectfully and called me Miss Martinez, never Jessica, always Miss Martinez. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. Meanwhile, my career was soaring. Chen Technologies went public, and my stock options made me a millionaire. I was featured in business magazines as one of the top operations executives in the tech industry. The Chen building became the most successful co-working space in the city. We expanded to 3 more buildings in other cities. I bought a beautiful house, bigger and nicer than Richard's old house. I drove a luxury car. I travelled the world. Everything Richard had lost, I had gained. And I had earned it through hard work, intelligence, and integrity, not through cheating and corruption. The best part? I didn't have to step on anyone to get there. I didn't have to lie or cheat or betray anyone. I had succeeded on my own merits. That's the difference between people like Richard and people like me. He thought success meant stepping on others. I knew success meant lifting yourself up through your own efforts. 2 years after I started managing the Chen building, I got an unexpected visitor to my office. It was Vanessa. She looked different, older, more serious. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect manicure. She wore a simple business suit and looked nervous. Miss Martinez, she said formally. Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Vanessa? She took a deep breath. I came to apologize. I know it's years too late, but I need to say it. I treated you terribly when we worked together. I was lazy and entitled. I blamed you for my mistakes. And I never spoke up when my uncle fired you, even though I knew you didn't deserve it. I was surprised. This didn't sound like the Vanessa I remembered. I've grown up a lot since then, she continued. Losing everything, the job, the money, the reputation, it was hard. But it was also necessary. I needed to fail to learn how to actually work. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. I also wanted to tell you something, Vanessa said. I know now that you were the reason Sterling and Associates ran so smoothly for all those years. You were the backbone of that firm, and we all took you for granted. You deserved so much better than how we treated you. I looked at Vanessa and saw genuine remorse in her eyes. She really had changed. Thank you for saying that, I said. It means a lot. I also wanted to ask, Vanessa hesitated. I heard you sometimes help young lawyers who are just starting out, that you mentor them. I was wondering if... if you might be willing to give me some advice, not as my employee or my servant, but as someone who knows how to succeed through actual hard work. I thought about it. The old me would have been angry, would have wanted to hold on to that grudge forever. But the new me, the successful, happy me, realized that holding on to anger only hurts yourself. Okay, I said. I'll mentor you. But on one condition. You have to be completely honest with me about your struggles and actually listen to my advice. I will, Vanessa promised. I really will. Over the next year, I mentored Vanessa. I taught her everything I had learned about hard work, organization, integrity, and respect. She was a good student. She listened, she learned, she applied what I taught her. She eventually became a decent lawyer. Not great, but competent. And more importantly, she became a better person. 5 years after I was fired from Sterling and Associates, I stood in my corner office at Chen Technologies, looking out over the city. David Chen walked in with a bottle of champagne. "We're celebrating," he announced. "Chen Technologies just became a billion-dollar company, and you, as Vice President of Operations with significant stock options, are now worth about $20 million. I laughed in disbelief. $20 million? You earned every penny, David said, pouring champagne. None of this would have happened without you. We toasted to success, to friendship, and to revenge done right. Later that evening, I drove past the strip mall where Sterling and Associates had briefly tried to operate after their eviction. The space was now a nail salon. I drove past the Chen building, where Richard Sterling still maintained his small office, working hard and paying his debts. And I drove to my beautiful house on the hill, where I lived alone but was never lonely because I had built a life full of meaning, success, and genuine relationships. As I parked in my driveway, I thought about the day I was fired, how devastated I had been, how unfair it all seemed. But that firing had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It had freed me from a toxic workplace and pushed me towards something better. Richard Sterling had thought he was punishing me by firing me. He thought he was protecting his incompetent niece and his corrupt business. Instead, he had destroyed himself and given me the motivation to build something amazing. They fired me to hurt me, so I evicted them and took everything they had. And the best part? I did it all legally, ethically, and with a smile on my face. That's the thing about revenge. When you do it right, it's not about destroying your enemy. It's about building yourself up so high that their betrayal becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. Richard Sterling tried to end my career. Instead, he launched it. Vanessa tried to make me her servant. Instead, she became my student. Sterling and Associates tried to throw me away. Instead, I rose higher than they ever could. As I walked into my beautiful house, kicked off my shoes, and poured myself a glass of wine, I smiled. They had fired me, thinking I was worthless, so I evicted them and proved I was priceless. And revenge? Revenge was sweet, sweeter than I ever imagined. The sweetest revenge isn't destruction, it's success. It's becoming so successful that your enemies can only watch in awe as you soar past them. That's exactly what I did, and it felt absolutely wonderful.